Your source for all things Texas Tech. This is the Ask Level podcast from Double T 97.3.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome into another episode of the Ask Level podcast. Alongside Chris Level, I'm Chois Woodman. This podcast, as usual, brought to you by our friends at Cantex Roofing and Construction.
I'm Mike Hebert, owner of Cantex Roofing and Construction. Every day is game day, and we'll get it right when it comes to your roofing, construction, windows, and mirrors. Call Cantex Roofing and Construction today. Together, we are one serving you.
Mr. Level, we have come and gone to the Pacific Northwest. Was not quite the trip I think most Red Raider fans were hoping for or imagined, quite frankly.
Yeah, or it wasn't the trip that you and I had imagined either.
No, it seemed like Murphy's Law all the way through. Wait, I don't even know.
Yeah,
if I know
no, that's right.
Whatever.
If whatever can go wrong will.
Right, that one.
The radio equipment was a mess. You pick us up a rental truck to go back and forth from Idaho to Washington, and the trim kit on this Ram truck is Laramie.
I didn't know if we are going to bring that up or not, but
yeah, so that's awesome.
Bad omen from last year.
Yeah, that's right.
Oof.
That's right. It was 95 degrees.
Yeah,
which was not and you just considering the level of opponent, you probably played your worst game since Joey's in Joey's tenure. I mean,
hard to argue.
Yeah, the game versus Baylor in his first year, that was you got kicked pretty good there, had some turnovers and all that. Baylor was picked to win the league. They had a lot of talent, and they had not played well up until that point, and they just kind of rolled over you.
Yep.
And then last year, you go to Austin, and Texas was a college football playoff team, and they were just a lot better than you were, and you were missing some guys and this and that. But this was just, I don't think Washington State's better than you, but I do think they were tougher, more disciplined. I mean, all the things that you kind of talk about, and it's hard to suggest otherwise in any capacity based on kind of what you saw. And there's just not really much positive to glean from that performance. Nothing really to build on, nothing to feel great about. I mean, did you cover better? Did you fix some of the secondary issues? I mean, maybe, but then Washington State's like, okay, you're going to drop 8. Well, we're just going to run our QB to the tune of a school record 200 yards.
Yeah.
They ran for over 300. I mean, so it's hard to just come away going.
This is a team that averaged 85 yards a game last year on the ground too.
Yeah,
I mean, it felt like everything, all your problems you had in week 1 changed in week 2. Maybe the penalties was the one thing that was consistent, not a problem from week to week, but your pass defense was the obvious issue in week 1. It was your run defense in week 2. Your passing game, your offensive passing game was good in week 1, and it was a massive issue in week 2. It just felt like Coach McGuire said to you and in the post-game press conference, we're our own worst enemy at this point. It just feels like everything, you can just kind of point the finger back at Texas Tech, and man, that's not a good feeling after 2 weeks of the season when you don't feel like you're right as a team.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's you're trying to figure out where to go from here. And I mean, I kind of asked Joey that very question.
Yep.
And he was like, I don't have the answers right now. I need to look at this, and we've got to all be better, all of us. And I think Barron said that after the game. Joey said it. It's hard to, they do, and then they know it, but it's just, man, that's a and it's a non-conference game.
Sure.
So the real tournament starts in a couple weeks. You've got 10 of these things left. 6 of them are at home. You're home for the next 3 weeks, but yeah, and then now you're starting. I get sick and tired of talking about injuries and all that, but boy, that all of a sudden started to pop up big time. Is that you've got some pretty high profile people out, but that's the depth was something that was really talked about quite a bit, and I guess you're going to get into a lot of that. And I hate to admit this, and it's compounded now that you may have a couple of injuries on the left side of your offensive line, but you're just not very good up front, and it's hard to play football on that, on offense when you're a group up front. And I didn't think your quarterback played particularly well. I think he'd be the first one to tell you that. I think he missed a lot.
Quite a bit.
I think he was sped up, and maybe that has to do with what he's dealing with up front. But I think there was times where maybe he had some time to sit and before he pulled the trigger, and just was, just kind of sped up. And I guess the right word is inaccurate. And whether it's being on different pages or whatever, and boy, because I think you had guys open. I mean, a lot of the time you had guys open.
When we were there on Thursday with at the Coach McGuire show, both he and Zach Kitley called Taj Brooks a security blanket, and man, I don't. Being without your security blanket, being without your best player on your team, it's not nothing. And
No,
I don't know how much it changes Saturday night. I don't know how much, it's some, but how much is we'll never know. But man, it felt like you could use number 28 on Saturday night as well.
But Joey and everybody, they've talked about it, and that's what Pat Mahomes talked to these kids about. That find a way,
sure,
figure it out,
no doubt.
And they just they couldn't settle in. And you're right, the Taj thing, what he gives you on the field, but then was it just as much of a mental thing? But are you that young, or I don't want to think you're that fragile to, and I'll tell you what else, man. And I don't know if this is just my opinion, but you just sense from the first 2 games that the opposition has a bit more of an edge than you do, and is a bit, I don't know if the right word is hungrier, or but you just, you're missing something. It's almost like an intangible, and I just don't know where that is. But I mean, Joey would say that falls on him, so you just have to figure out a way to get to him. And I don't know, do you wholesale changes already? Do you stick with what you're doing? I mean, one of the things that, and Joey brought this up at halftime and after the game, but it's like, well, are we going to quit messing around with the 4th down? If we can't be any better, because some of those 4th downs, I guarantee you, the book, which everybody hates hearing that term now, but the book is saying, you're at 58% likely to get it, 65%, whatever. I don't know. This is the reason why you're going, and you end up 1 of 5. That's 20% conversion rate. And so, are you calling the wrong play, or should you just not go for it? Should you just punt and play field position? Because if you do the analytics, you can't just pick and choose when you do it. You kind of either have to do it or don't do it.
See, I feel like there's is it calling the wrong play? Is it execution? I feel like it's a combination of everything. It's not like you could pinpoint, because one of those 4th downs, Jalen Conyers is running, he gets the ball knocked out. It slows him down to the point where he can't get back up and go to get the first down.
And Cam Dickey whiffed on a block.
Yeah, whiffed on. Yeah, it feels like it's just.
And I think on one of the 4th downs, Barron had a pass batted down.
Yes. It just feels like it's a whole host of problems right now. It's not just one thing you can hone in on and fix. And I think that's probably what's more maddening than anything for.
Yeah. And like, how about this? It's hard to play football this way, but like average starting field position.
Oh my gosh.
For Texas Tech, you started drives on your own 24 on average. Washington State started drives on their own 44. 20 yards difference of, because it just felt like the game was being played on your end of the field the entirety of the.
They have 5 or 6 that started in plus territory, 5 or 6 drives that started there because of turnovers, turnover on downs. It just because he couldn't flip the field on a punt. It was a maddening night for sure. And I feel like it just feels like there's no answers right now. And who knows? That's what you hope. You turn things around and feel a lot better going into conference play this week. And we'll preview that matchup in a little bit, but it just doesn't feel. It feels like what you're at one of your lowest points in the last 3 years for sure.
Yeah, and it's just a non-conference game.
It is.
So with basically the entirety of, but yeah, this wasn't about losing as much as how you lost.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's a difference. I think if you, not that it would have made people feel a ton better, but if you lose a nail biter and get, there's a bad call or just you can't quite make the one play at the end, that's one thing. But to just kind of just not, a bit of a no-show that is, and so much of it is just your own doing. A lot of miscommunication on offense with the offensive line and snap count. You can see Barron and Sheridan Wilson not being on the same page, and just the false starts, and I mean, just on and on. So yeah, it needs to be fixed quickly.
We got a whole slew of questions, Level, so let's go ahead and start diving into a few of those. A couple of different ones on injuries. One person asked, can you give us an update on the players that were injured on Saturday night? And then Tony also asks, when will Taj Brooks be available again?
Yeah, I mean, and depending on when people are listening to this, you'll get a better feel for that once Joey and they release that injury report for the week. So depending on when you're listening to this, but this is just before we're talking about that, before we hear those things. So just based on the game Saturday night, I mean, I wouldn't expect great news on Vinny Scurry, and that's maybe the most concerning one because he was your best offensive lineman. But when you cart a big boy off, I can't imagine that's good news. And I guess the best case scenario, he's out for a while and not for the year. But I mean, don't know. That's a bad one. It appears he looked like he was in a lot of pain on the field. Sterling Porche, it appeared he was. I think Brian Jensen said on the broadcast he didn't have his wits about him, which is another way of saying I think he got dinged in the head area and just kind of, he looked very wobbly. So if that is the case, that he's probably unlikely for this week. And that's your starting left side of your offensive line. I think Mo Horn left and never returned after a crackback block.
He got popped in the chin.
Yep. Don't know where that is. Is that a concussion or a chest injury or whatever? Because I mean, he just never saw it coming. It's just like he just got stood up and then just kind of dropped,
which wasn't called, by the way. But
and Quincy Ledet, I think, left. I feel probably best about him, but I don't know. But he's been on the injury report for the last 2 weeks.
Sure.
And then this isn't an injury, but you're going to be without Chapman Lewis for, I guess, the first half of this game after the ejection, because I think that wasn't that late in the first half.
Because it was in the first half, so he's clear. If it would have happened in the second half, then he would have.
Oh, he just has to, okay. You're right. Okay, so he's good. He's good to go.
So
yeah. Okay, sorry, I couldn't remember the timing. It's all.
No, I'm pretty sure it was in the first half. I'm almost certain of that but yeah, that's still another one that was. Another player lost on Saturday.
And the rule is you just have to miss a half or not a full game?
Correct. You have to miss the next half.
Yeah.
Whatever that next half is.
Yeah. So that's but that happened and and then Taj, I think, I mean, I can't, it would be speculation, but he's there. There's nothing visible. Right. I don't know if it's this week or next, but I don't think this is long term at all.
Okay.
Otherwise, they would have told you that it was long term. But so I don't know if you see him this week or not. But heck, man,
That's a lot of injuries for week 2 right
well,
there.
and you're not, and then no, Harvey Dyson wasn't even there.
Right.
And, there's obviously no Adederay and no Spencer. And so I feel like you're getting in no Esters. So you've been really hit at that edge spot where you didn't have 4 of your guys that I think would have been heavily either starters or heavy rotation guys. And so you're really thin on the edge. And that's where injuries really pop up is when you get hammered at one spot.
Yep.
Which is seemingly what's happening right now at that outside linebacker defensive end spot.
No doubt. All right. Another question from the audience. Actually, we'll combine these two as well. Paolo says, does someone's seat on this staff start to get hot now? Joey's included. Gilbert asks, is Joey the right guy?
Well, look, if you look big picture, I mean, it's hard to just like turn. It's some people it's not hard for, but I'm just saying, like, if you look at the people that are in charge, he's had a Big 12 winning record in back-to-back years. He's won bowl games in back-to-back years. These are firsts, and like the winning record in the Big 12. He's done it twice. These are the first times since 2009. So there is progress, but at some point you don't want to just show a little bit. I mean, you're ready to kind of make some noise nationally. I think that everybody internally would tell you they have everything that they need to compete and win. You're competitive with NIL. You've got the facilities. You've got competitive coaching salaries. You've got, I mean, just everything that you would need. And when you don't win, that's the business. That's the business, is that questions get asked more, and it's the hard part of the business. And now you got a lot more money flowing through this deal, and so maybe patience is a little less than it used to be because of how much money is flowing through this deal. And I think those are fair questions to ask. But it's probably too early to, if this trend continues, and the losing and just the penalties and all that, you're darn right. I mean, there'll be some changes that have to be made. That's just the way it goes, man. That is just the way it goes. So I think after 2 games, though, I don't know if you're there yet, but I mean, I can't tell you, you have to have this record at this time, or you need to show that. I don't know what that, it's kind of like the old saying, you kind of know what it looks like when you see it. So I just don't know if we're there yet, but this is not the good start that everybody was hoping for. And so with that, you burn up some equity that maybe you had, some feel good that you had previously.
Sure. And you've had this, I mean, quite frankly, Level, you've had this start 2 years before this too. You've had slow starts to the season that you turn around because you feel better about how you play late in the season, and you gain optimism for the next season. And that
6-2 in November.
And that's going to be a lot harder to do this year with the schedule you have. But I mean, the reality of it is your schedule hasn't changed. Your schedule hasn't changed. You still play 3 Big 12 teams. Your first 3 Big 12 home games are against teams that combined for a 9-27 record last year. And you've got a game against North Texas before that.
Let's just call it what it is. On paper, and that's not how this game is played, on paper.
Yeah.
And I think some of these games look a little bit different now than they did before, specifically the Arizona State game, because they've come out of the gate like gangbusters, and they don't look like one of the worst teams in the Big 12. And in fact, people are if you're power ranking this deal, they're going to be a lot higher on the power ranking than you are. In fact, you could be, based on what we've seen to this point, you're going to be at or near the bottom. But 4 of your next 5 games are at home.
Yep.
And you've been pretty good at home. You theoretically really should win those 4 games. The Arizona one, that'll be a tough one in Tucson with their playmaking, and they've got some first round talents on their team. With a DB, and they've got an offensive tackle, and then a receiver, and then a really, really good quarterback.
But they don't look as good as, People thought
No,
at one
no,
point too.
but
Oh, sure. I'm not.
you've got a 3-9 road record that you're taking in there. That's also worth pointing out. But
Sounds worse when you say it out loud.
well, I mean, it just is what it
I
is.
know it is. Oof.
But the next 4 home games will kind of tell you where you're headed, I think.
Yeah.
So, I can't. If you go lose to Arizona, you're going to be an underdog. I don't think that's not a bad loss. They're preseason
Sure.
ranked in the top 20. It's one of the kind of the semi contenders to be in the Big 12 title hunt. But the North Texas, Arizona State, Cincinnati, and Baylor games at home, those are, that's where you need to make some hay. And if that doesn't happen, I mean, the talk will get louder and louder, and that's
Right.
that. I hate that part, but that's just the reality of the business everybody's in here.
Yeah, no doubt. With that, we'll continue on to this next question from Brandel. It says, what are your expectations now, or how have your expectations changed through 2 games for this team?
Yeah, I would have thought you could be an outside contender for the Big 12 championship, and that you could have played meaningful games in November. At this point, like I don't even like look at it like that. I almost just kind of go short term and kind of like, this is week to week, man. Like, what does it look like this week and then the next week? I think you'd be foolish to kind of look big picture at this point. We don't know the status of some of these players injury wise. You're and I love Barron. I think he's a great kid. He didn't play his best game the other night, and I think he'd be the first one to tell you that. And he said this: "I've got to be better," and all those things.
Yep.
If you're going to make a leap, he's going to have to be a big part of it. He's going to have to make up for some deficiencies elsewhere, and make some plays that aren't necessarily there to make, and some of this skill around him is going to have to make some plays. And
that's where, we talked about Taj earlier. Taj Brooks is your best playmaker, make something out of nothing type of player.
Him or Josh Kelly.
Those are your 2 guys. And without one of your best playmakers, someone else has to step up. I mean, it's as simple as that. Douglas did it a little bit, but there were plenty of times, and you said it, Barron just missed guys. I mean, there were times where you had one-on-ones down the field with a receiver beating a DB, and Barron misses them. And you've got to connect on some of those vertical shots, and you've got to connect on some of the over the middle stuff that he missed. And you got to have better play out of that position and several positions to feel better about this team overall.
Yeah.
Another question, Level, this one from Twitter. Rob asks, what is your ideal college football offense?
Is that your coworker, Rob?
That is my new coworker. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, Rob, bro.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a 2-part question. Ideally, I'd have I'd be able to smash you and then throw it. I mean, I'd be very balanced.
Yeah.
But it's easy to say. I would want to be able to run it when I wanted to, and I didn't care if the opposition knew it. The problem there is that, can you ultimately get the players to be able to do that? And so that takes like studs up front.
Sure.
And so, I mean, this is why, you want to be able to do something similar to what the Georgias and the Alabamas do, where they just can like lean on you, hammer it, but they also have the explosiveness outside. And so if one game you need to run it for 300, great. If the next game you need to throw it for 350, you can do that.
Yeah.
I don't think you're anywhere near that right now. That's what I would do. I think a lot of people, and the one caveat I would say is, I wouldn't want a running quarterback offense. Like, I don't think you can. You're chancing it, but if you're asking me to pick, I wouldn't have an offense that majored in the QB run game. What I would want, though, is a QB that was elusive enough to extend plays. And there's a difference. I just don't think that I would chance it with majoring in QB run game, because I think at some point somebody's ankle is going to get twisted. Somebody's going to, and I wouldn't major in that. I would want to be able to have a guy that was elusive enough and all that. But I mean, ideally, you'd want to be able to smash people and then be explosive at the same time, which you're asking for a lot, but it's more of what you see in the NFL. I mean, pro style, but you got to have the right guys to be able to do that. And like for Texas Tech, you're never going to have blue chip talent all over the place, which is why Mike came in here years ago and gave you an identity. It's like, we can get these kinds of players. This scheme gives us an advantage. And so with that, you need to be able to have a mini version of kind of what I'm talking about and be able to do a little bit of everything. But it's until your offensive line gets fixed, and it's not. I hate admitting it, but it's just not, and it appears to be a long ways off, because you're trying to grow a bunch of young kids up in a hurry within the program to turn it over to them, and then you're like, okay, now we've started stacking these classes, and now we've got our own pipeline. We're not having to portal it, because Woodman, you think about it, all these portal additions that you had. This is speed dating in a span of about 2 to 3 days last year in December.
Yeah.
And I think that
crazy.
The market, and there's been articles written about this, the market grossly underestimated what quality offensive linemen were going to cost. There's a lot of tweets, there's a lot of articles, there's a lot of, and but it is speed dating, and so you kind of end up with what you end up with, and so, and you went with 4 of them, and like, I think we can be the first to say it, the Maurice Rodriguez thing, that was not an immediate help at all. I don't even know if he traveled to Pullman. Yeah. He's not anywhere close to playing. Don't know if, like, I would even say that I think it's fair to question whether, if you had to trim your roster, which with the settlement case, which is still up in the air and all those things, and there's some discussion about that. But if you do ultimately have to trim your roster, does he make it or not? So I just offer that up to say you needed immediate help, and there's one that didn't offer it. I think the other 3 did, because they were playing and starting or semi-starters or whatever, with Porsche, Carter, and Scurry. But now you've potentially lost one of those, and so it's just so much of what you want to do on offense is dictated by your group up front. That's just how it is, and how good your quarterback is. So
yeah. One more question. This one from Archer, and then we will get to a quick preview of North Texas. This one says, why does it seem like everybody else can have instant impact 5 stars, but yet us in basketball with Fisher and Burnett, and now football with Hudson, don't have the instant impact guy?
Well, and I always am like, man, are other teams just always healthier? Other teams make it look so easy.
Yeah.
Doing this or that, and you always feel like it's the PTSD of being a Tech fan, but you always feel like you're
the world's against us,
one hand tied behind your back, kind of deal. So I certainly get that question. I mean, Micah played quite a bit. Whenever they went empty sets and there was no running back in there, he was kind of in there. I think they tried to throw it to him at times. He was just covered. I think it's you don't want to paint it with a broad brush and say, hey, well, this is, no, he's internally, I think that the thought is he's just fine. He's just learning. But it's, I think Joey said it after the game the other day. He's playing one of these positions. It's like, okay, who do we take off?
Yeah.
Is he better than Coy Aiken? Is he better than Josh Kelly? Is he better than Caleb Douglas right now? And I think that they're saying to themselves, the answer is no. My thing is, there's a lot of conversation about Micah, and I get it, and he's warranted that, and Joey talked him up, and there was a lot of hype and all that. He's not fixing 37-16. He's not going to come in and cause you not to commit turnovers and penalties and all those. This is lots of problems here. But if you want to keep talking about Micah Hudson, we can. But he'll continue to play and play a bit more and all those things. And I don't want to say he's not an instant impact. He just hasn't done much the first 2 weeks, but I think it's just, I don't think there's any, frustration internally about anything on either side of it. But, so we'll see what it looks like in another month or 6 weeks or so and see if, if much has changed, because he's still the same very talented kid, but he's learning and he's got some good dudes around him.
Sure. And missing the spring can't be overlooked. I mean, that you look at those all, I think the four other major receivers out there for Texas and for Ohio State and all these other Alabama, these true freshman receivers, every single one of them participated in their spring football. And that's how we've seen the freshman impact over the last 5 to 10 years grow so much, is because everybody leaves high school early and is able to go through everything with their team. And that does seem to matter in terms of being caught up with everything.
Yeah, the data, there was like a study done. It wasn't like a study, it's just somebody like looked into it and researched it, but I can't remember the time frame. It was like 2016 to 2022 or 2021. There was like a 5 or 6 year span where somebody really pulled out a lot of the data, and they looked at 5-star receivers as freshmen, and I think 12% of them had more than 300 yards in their first year over the 5-year span. And we're talking, I can't remember all the names in it, but it's like I can't remember where everybody was at, but like your CD Lambs, your Jamar Chases, they were part of this little stretch too. It's just so and I don't remember the exact data and if there was any caveats with the research done, but I just think that we're way too early there. But I certainly get the question. People were excited about him, and you want to have reason for hope and all those things, and people are freaking out. Okay, he's going to leave. I don't think that's any. His dad's a Red Raider. His quote unquote handler, if you want to really go that way, is basically on Tech staff, and Brian Nance, who's had a relationship with Micah since he was in 6th or 7th grade. So anyways, but we spent a lot of time about. You've got a long list of problems,
a whole lot.
And playing or not playing Micah Hudson is just not one of them right now, in my opinion. But
okay, lastly, Level, North Texas. What do we anticipate? I think last week we anticipated a high-scoring game. Didn't end up being that way, at least on Tech's end. I think that's what a lot of people would expect for this particular game. North Texas with a lot of offense and not a lot of defense.
Yeah, they're. I mean, you're right that they're gonna throw it quite a bit. Chandler Morris, who's been at Oklahoma and at TCU, he's the quarterback. He's going to throw it all over the place. He did have 3 interceptions against SFA. But it's going to be more traditional air raid, and I don't think they have all-world personnel. They do have 2 former offensive linemen, and Larry Moore and Landon Peterson, that are starting for them, I believe, up front. There's a lot of connections on the coaching staff. Looked this up recently just to be sure, but obviously Eric Morris is the head coach, but Stephen Hamby, who was on your staff as recently as this past February and March, he's now on quality control. Jordan Davis, who played receiver here, is the OC. Brian Keggins, who was an offensive lineman here way back in the day, is their strength and conditioning coach. Connor Killian, who played here, is a GA. Clay Jennings, who was a DB's coach when Cliff was here, is the safeties coach there. So there's a lot of connections, a lot of coaching staff wise, but there's only two players on the offensive line. But I would expect them to be able to throw it some, but and it's an 11 a.m. kick, and you've got, I think, the Hall of Fame deal this weekend. Is this not the Wes Welker weekend?
I believe you're correct. Yeah.
Because
the Broncos play on Thursday night this week, so he'll be.
So, but
Broncos, Dolphins. Sorry,
you just have to play better, man. And it's you can't turn it over. It goes without saying. But man, stop with the the penalties and the self-inflicted wounds on that. I mean,
Yeah.
21 penalties through 2 games. I mean, the most you were penalized in games last year was 9, and you had to do those twice. And there was a game last year you had 1 penalty. And it's like 21 of them. I mean,
also the turnovers. I mean, both the self-inflicted stuff. You gave up Level 30 if you're counting it like Tech counts it with turnover on downs counting as turnovers. You gave up 30 points off of turnovers. 30 out of 37 points for Washington State last week came off of turnovers or turnover on downs. And it's you got to be better about not hurting yourself this week. Is that what it takes for you to help kind of restore some confidence, just seeing a cleaner game? Better offense?
That's very well said. I think clean, because I think you thought to go win on the road, typically you have to play pretty clean.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's rare that you can go unless you're just so much better than the opponent, like from a talent standpoint. And right now you're not. You know, if you clean up the turnovers and the penalties, I think you give yourself a chance. And you should be a lot more talented than North Texas, but if you go turn it over a bunch and get penalized a bunch, I mean, all bets are off.
Yep.
And as good as you maybe felt about the secondary this weekend, you know, you give up 200 yards to a quarterback running the football and 300 yards total. So it's like, you know, and then offensively, it's just whether we're calling the wrong plays, we're not on the same page.
Yeah.
You know, your identity and all that. So anyway, but I know we got to go, but thank you to Cantex Roofing. Hopefully there's better days ahead. I know hope is not a strategy, but I always suggest to keep it alive. You and I will both try to find our joy. And with that, have a good week, Woodman.
Appreciate you, Level. That is Chris Level. I'm Chois Woodman. It's been the Ask Level podcast, brought to you by Double T 97.3.
You've been listening to the Ask Level podcast, powered by Double T 97.3.